This week, Tom Goings from Tanium is with us to discuss supply chain visibility. Then Ashley Leonard from 6 Sense joins us to talk about the current state of zero trust. Finally, in the enterprise security news, whether you want InsureTechs or not, they're here and you're getting them. And don't worry, we'll explain what InsureTechs are. A potential deal to take Sumo Logic private, a potential deal to take Rapid7 private, 32-year-old Siren shutting down, hoping for an asset sale. A firm shorts Darktrace and releases a scathing report. Some more layoffs, but the NSA is hiring, don't worry. Codebreakers solve some 500-year-old ciphers, the real cost of meetings, and sushi terrorists. All that and more on this day, on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
All right, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, and happy National Pizza Day. This is episode 305, recorded on Thursday, February 9th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Master of Marketing, the Mayor of Mayhem, Tyler Shields. How are you, Tyler?
I'm doing well. Yet another day in paradise. Pizza Day, I can get behind that. Big fan.
Yeah, there were a lot of things I could have gone with. There was Cut the Cord Day, National Toothache Day, or even National Bagel and Lox Day, but I went with National Pizza Day so that I could say pineapple on pizza is amazing. So I chose violence out of those options.
Yeah, that was not a good choice because pineapple on pizza is not amazing. It is immoral and should be deemed illegal. There's only two ways to eat pizza: cheese or pepperoni. That's it.
Anyway, that's enough from Tyler. Also joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the Captain of Content, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
Well, I have to disagree with Tyler. I think pineapple and bacon on pizza is delicious. And while pepperoni is also good, it is not the only topping that is satisfactory.
Seriously?
There are so many good pizzas, but I was dismayed this morning when I was looking up what today is, that where I live in Massachusetts, their favorite pizza is Greek pizza, and that's just wrong. No olives. Chopped tomatoes on pizza make it soggy. Just no.
No feta cheese on pizza?
Oh. Feta cheese is fine, but olives and chopped tomatoes.
Yeah, no Greek pizza then. Okay. I'll take pizza in almost any form. I love it. Except for really greasy. I can't have too much meat on pizza. I think it gets ridiculous. Like just the amount of grease rolling off that thing. Get a paper towel, take a roll of paper towels, just roll it over there.
Just give me a good slice of New York City thin crust cheese. That's all I need. Keep it simple.
Oh yeah, that's great.
I mean, you can't really argue with that, but you did say that pepperoni is the only pizza, and sorry, no.
No, I said no. Cheese or pepperoni, and I could do without pepperoni. If I only had to pick one, it'd be cheese all day.
No sausage?
No, and you can take your bacon and pineapple and go back to California.
Well, I've actually never had pineapple and bacon in California.
All right. Let's move on. Some announcements here. You can follow us on LinkedIn for updates across our organization, show highlights, and more. You can find us by searching for Security Weekly Productions. And I did choose the day. I did stir the pot. So I can't blame you guys for indulging me. Also, I run B-Sides Knoxville. We're about to have our 9th year, and I run a podcast. So, I'm going to plug my event here. So B-Sides Knoxville is open for talk submissions and sponsors. If you have a great talk you want to submit at a mid-sized, low-key B-Sides conference with amazing food and a hacker movie after party, check us out at bsidesknoxville.com. If you want to sponsor, drop an email to info@bsidesknoxville.com. And not to make it sound like I run the whole thing myself, that would be absolutely impossible. I have some amazing organizers that and we all pitch in. Yeah, I can't even say I do the most work on it, but Yeah, some great folks. We put a lot of effort into it every year, and we get great reviews every year. So with that, this interview is sponsored by Tanium. Today's topic is on getting visibility into your software supply chain. We're excited to have Tom Goings, Director of Product Management at Tanium, with us today. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, how's it going? And for the record, pineapple does belong on pizza.
Yes, you are outnumbered, Tyler. That's great. Also great is I noticed in your bio, you mentioned humble beginnings building a PC to play games, which I can absolutely relate to. I used to work at CompUSA back in the 90s, and I remember we got an opportunity to go to a press release event. Intel was coming out with the Pentium 3 500, and we got an opportunity to buy the processor and the motherboard for $100 each. You know, back when that Pentium 3 was retailing for like $700. So that was the first PC that I built myself. Was out of that Pentium 3 and motherboard. I had computers way before then, but that was the first one I built myself. I put a Voodoo 3 3000 in it, and Unreal Tournament played great on it.
Mine was I don't remember the exact specs. It just shows you how long ago it was in my brain, but it was a Sony processor, so it was like just a real simple motherboard processor, and we were playing Age of Empires on a LAN. We knew nothing about LAN networks. We were configuring IP addresses based upon random numbers, and amazingly, it still worked. Like, I don't know how we got that network running. If I go back and think about it, I'm like, we were so lucky. I think we played a little bit of TIE Fighter versus X-Wing. So yeah,
trial and error. You just really wanted to play those. That's how a lot of us learned, right? Is just we really wanted to get something to work. Yeah. And video games are, I think, still an entry point for a lot of people into tech and security and stuff like that.
Yeah, my son was doing some consulting for a bit, helping a friend out because he was interested in building his own computer. So that just led him into like going and doing work for small companies with my friend as a kind of a sponsor. And it was just one of those things he just happened to get into. He doesn't like doing it anymore, but he still can. But yeah, that was his entry level, was video games. That was the very first thing he did.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember when that all exploded, when video cards didn't used to be a thing. Like, you might have to go get a sound blaster and set up your IRQs and figure that whole mess out. But yeah, I remember when those gaming cards first started to come out. I was working at CompUSA back then. Exciting times. Very exciting times.
Oh, you just gave me nightmares. The whole IRQ setting and the driver loading and the i6 ports. Oh my gosh. Okay, I think I got to go away now. That's just too long ago. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah, the stuff you would go through, like you'd have to read the box, see what the requirements are, consider whether or not you had the money to upgrade your system so you could play that game so it didn't play like garbage. Yeah, it was a whole thing. It was a whole production that went on for you to be able to install and play and enjoy a game. I mean, if you weren't into console gaming, so console gaming was still big back then. You just buy the game and you knew it would work. But where's the fun in that? Where's the challenge?
Yeah, I think we just went through back in my day, we walked uphill both ways, the conversation with IT gaming. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that earlier today in a Slack also. So that's the second time. That's the second time I've fulfilled an old man stereotype today. All right, so let's run through some foundational stuff before we really get into the meat of this conversation. So let's start out with what Tanium is. For folks who don't know, I mean, I think most people know what Tanium is, but I don't want to leave anybody out. How's it sold? How's it installed? How's it used? Just if you could give us like the elevator pitch on that.
Yeah, so Tanium is an endpoint platform, and when we say endpoint platform, that means that it does both security and management on devices. Now, it's deployed as an agent, so every endpoint has an agent. and then we have a centralized infrastructure that we're able to go in at size and scale, and it's like a command and control is the best way I can describe it for the really techie people. If there's anything that you want to do in the Tanium platform, you can write in any language that runs on the endpoint. So we're Linux, AIX, Windows, Mac, and Solaris, I believe, are the 5 that we support, and multiple versions of Linux. And so if you can write the program, you can actually have our network, or what we call as a linear chain, go out and do the work on those endpoints. So it's really, really fast. I've got plenty of stories to say about how it works, but the idea is that you can go and say, give me all of your installed applications across 320,000 endpoints, and it will come back live in about that. So it's it's just seconds. And we've verified that multiple times with multiple customers. We've had this conversation through various different ways. But that's the key, is like we are an agent endpoint tool that we use the linear chain. No size is too big. We can manage everything on the endpoint. And then we have multiple components that are installed on top of it that I consider like workflows. And so there's different things for like asset management, doing network discovery. So imagine having 320,000 Discover engines on your network. That's how our Discover service works, and just so on. So then we can do that across the security spectrum as well for like compliance, threat detection, and just multiple other pieces. Like we've got something like 14 different components. I think it's actually up to 16 now across management and security.
Right. Because once you have that engine on the endpoints, you can then build on that and do all kinds of stuff with that, from like EDR type stuff to MDM type stuff to vulnerability management type stuff to SBOM type stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. So the amazing thing about the software bill of materials that we created was it was actually built by one of our technical account managers. He built it using the endpoint platform as a what we call old school Tanium or technical account manager work, where you have a package, you deploy the package that is going to do a job. That job then writes to a file, and then you have the question or the sensor that goes around and says, give me the information that I'm looking for. And then we've incorporated it into a more streamlined workflow into the product so that you can do it now without having to know how to do all of the packages and everything like that. And we incorporated it into our client extensions so that you get the performance that you want out of Tanium. So you're not, hitting the index all of the time. It actually does that stuff. So the software bill of materials is probably one of my favorite stories right now, just because it was built by non-developer on the Tanium platform.
Yeah, that's very cool. But yeah, it seems like you already have a lot of this data. So a lot of the use cases, a lot of the modules that you're coming up with, they're basically taking a look at this data and thinking, okay, what are the use cases where this data can be useful? And like, I imagine you don't have to do a ton of changes to the plumbing, to the engines that actually run on the endpoints. It's more just getting that data in a format that's useful to customers, right?
So it depends. So this is like the standard statement when you're dealing with developers and product management. Sure. The thing is, taking something that is written by someone like myself, maybe someone that's technical, can write scripts and do those types of things. We tend to focus on, let's get the data and let's get it into a location that we can do it. What makes Tanium special is when we find something like that, we can then turn it over to the developers that are paid for this type of work, and then we optimize it. We make it so that it's not going to be clunky and that it can actually scale across all of the different environments. So I may write it in Windows, but then if I hand it over to our developers, they're going to be writing it in C++ to compile down into a DLL or whatever the binary that needs to run on the endpoint. And then it's going to be efficient. It's going to be CPU and memory sensitive. So that's the key, is like, we can do things as a proof of concept really, really quick with the Tanium platform. But when we want to then make it so that it's something that's supported, it does take a little bit more time because of the attention to detail we want to put into it.
So the other foundational thing here, we've been saying SBOM for a few minutes now. What do we mean when we're talking about SBOM? Because that could be slightly different depending on what kind of product, what kind of where in tech and IT and security you are.
Yeah. So software bill of materials. So if you're not familiar, I'm going to use the analogy I love, and that is software bill of materials is like. It's cookies. Absolutely. We got to go to cookies. I enjoy cookies. I've been eating cookies for 47 years. I think I'm going to continue. But the idea is if you go to a store and you look on the back of a package, that is an ingredients list. Well, all a software bill of materials is an ingredients list. It tells you what is in that box. And most vendors are being required or asked to provide that list when you purchase a piece of software. That's great. Now, me as a purchaser, I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to grab that box of cookies. I'm going to bring it home, and I'm going to put it in the pantry, or I'm going to put it in a cookie jar, or maybe I left it in the car for snacks on the way to pick up the kids. Maybe the kids take it and put it in the room. You don't know where all of those cookies are. So the software vendor has what is referred to as a build time software bill of materials. This is we want to tell the world what we're doing, and we want to present it to the world, and we want to give access to this software bill of materials. What Tanium is doing is taking the information that is installed with that package and finding it. So as soon as you find out that there's a vulnerability in your chocolate chips, you can no longer have chocolate chips in your house. Just can't do it. Maybe there's a chocolate allergy. Oh my God, that would suck. But you've got to find all of the chocolate, not just in the chocolate chip cookies, but in anything. We do what's called a runtime bill of materials. And what we're looking for is all of the packages that we can decompress, look at, and find that information and find where all of the chocolate is in your environment so we can present it to you as soon as it happens. Not when, but when the next vulnerability happens. So for instance, a little over a year and a half ago, or a little under a year and a half ago, a lot of people lost Christmas because of Log4j. Well, if you had this at that time, if we had that package, you could actually go through and say, give me all of my Log4j files that exists in my entire environment, and it would come to you in that speed of Tanium. So that way you could then determine where is my risk in this environment? What are my application paths that are affected by this? And so that's what we are. We're a runtime software bill of materials that is looking for specific packages with libraries, and we get that information that we can get to you. We store it on the endpoint so that when we do ask the question, we can provide it. And so that's what we're doing. That's what software bill of materials in the nutshell is, and what the difference is between the two types. There's the build time and the runtime.
Yeah, and it's for most of the stuff, right? Like I was going to throw out a trigger warning there before we started mentioning Java libraries, but it's just going to happen. I've never heard anybody quite put it that way, though. Lost their Christmas, but it's totally true, like that. And it happened not just near Christmas, but it happened on a Friday. Like I don't think it was super late on a Friday, but it was on a Friday, which is always when this stuff happens. But
well, and then we had the great scare of 2022 with the OpenSSL, like critical vulnerability that was coming out.
Right.
Everybody started like, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. We're going to lose Christmas again, and then the actual vulnerability was released, and come to find out, it's not actually a critical. Thank goodness, it's a high, and it's actually only going to be on very specific use cases, which is even better. So we had a bit of a push we had just released SBOM. We had a bit of a push for POCs of the product because Tanium tends to go with if we can help you during this time of crisis, we're going to give you the capability to POC it. No strings attached. You can POC it. You can find your stuff. You can fix your things. You can stay secure. And we had an uptick, but then as it kind of filtered out, we saw a decline in people asking for the POC because it wasn't as big of an issue. So we almost lost another Christmas, and I know it's going to be another 6 months to a year before we have another one of these pop up. Like it's It's not if, it is when it's happening. And this is an inventory issue, not a. I mean, it's inventory at its root. Security is secondary, like knowing where stuff is, in our opinion.
Right. So I actually do. I have done privately, and I think once publicly, a talk on Equifax's postmortem, and like one of the big lessons that we take away from the Equifax breach was that they didn't have the ability. They didn't know how to find a Java library in their environment. They tried and they failed to find it. So that they were absolutely aware that what was it? Struts was a big deal. The Struts vulnerability was a big deal. They treated it like a big deal. They went out looking for it. They didn't have the right tools. They didn't have the skills to use those tools. Like in some cases, those tools might have found it, but they used them incorrectly. And it was just, all the details we got about that breach because of the House subcommittee report really helped us, see and understand like what goes on in an organization when something like this happens. And I like to say, that should have been, when that report came out, that should have been, the light bulb moment for a lot of enterprises to say, okay, well, that's it. We need that ability. Like might not happen in the next 6 months, might not happen in the next 6 years, but at some point we're going to need to find a tiny Java library throughout a huge sprawling environment, right? Or maybe not a Java library. There's all kinds of.
So let's get off the Java bandwagon and talk maybe about Node.js or maybe Golang or PHP. Like any of those can have libraries in them. Yeah. And so in those we cover. The thing here is, I don't know any tool that can tell you as quickly as Tanium. Now, you're right. There's learning curves, and people will, release packages. So let's say we tomorrow find out that an HTTP client, there isn't one, we don't know of any, but let's say an HTTP client tomorrow is going to be a library that's affected. How fast is it going to be before the multitude of software vendors can tell you whether they're affected or not? How many old applications are no longer being supported that sit in your environment that have, the meta files and the jar files and the Node.js and the PHP that just sit there and nobody knows? And so that's the key, is we're trying to solve this situation where you don't know what is going to be affected. You have no clue because your vendors don't know for at least a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks. And in fact, there may be dead branches that you have no clue about, or maybe something that you developed yourself that you don't have listed as having this type of vulnerability. So there's just this multitude of software out there that could affect you in any way, shape, or form. When we did this test as a POC, so we POC'd this for about 2 to 3, 4 months before we started investing heavily into developing it. And what we found is Log4j, even after Christmas that never was, we found customers that still had it out there. They still had it on their endpoints. We had one host that had 1,700 known vulnerabilities from open source libraries. That's just unreasonable amount. So yeah, that's just what we're seeing. But that's why we built it. There was a definite need.
Right. So I guess, maybe a question about how you find this stuff, because it's, like in the Java library case, somebody might have changed the name of the file. Like a lot of the methods I saw people using back when it was going on was looking for specific names in the files, or it might be inside a WAR file, or like there, it could be nested somewhere. And then you've got all these other languages. You've got Python, PHP, Ruby, all these other ecosystems, that have these libraries. How do you tackle that problem? How do you find stuff when it might not be named exactly what you're looking for? It could be embedded in a zip file and stuff like that. Is that all stuff that you take into account? And how do you manage that?
So yeah, we run an indexing tool on the endpoint. So part of our client extensions agent has an indexer. And what we do is we set up a subscription to all of the files that are part of your ecosystem hunt that you want. So jar war or any of those files, which we can also go in and decompress. So it's not like if it's a compiled jar, we can go into it. What we do is then we have methodologies to go through and look at what is the name of the file, what is the name that's associated with it. There's a metadata file that we use. And so we use this to decompress the ecosystem and get as much information as we can. So there's various methods, like I said, for each of the ecosystems we use. The one thing that you will, and this is going to be the same for just about any SBOM tool, build time or runtime, the one thing you're not going to be able to get around is people just completely renaming everything. Like if they rename the method, if they rename the file, and they're just copying it and calling it their own self, unless they leave log4j in there or something, it's going to be difficult because there's no way to really, like, you can't get that deep into the code. You don't look at the code, you're looking at the relationships to the files. So that is a caveat out there. If people say that, hey, we can find log4js that have been renamed, I would be very concerned with that. But in general, I mean, it's pretty safe the way we do it. We go in, we look at the, like I said, we decompress the files and we do a look at it, and we use the metadata file, and you do just the standard methodologies. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And yeah, so for each new so I imagine you've got libraries of content for when you find these things, how you remediate them, that kind of thing, and for each new platform that you tackle, say Golang, you've got to kind of build this whole library of information around it. Is that the case?
So actually, it's amazing. We don't. We're building the methodologies to find the libraries. And then once we have the libraries, it's just now a matter of time before the issue comes up. So each ecosystem has its own methodology of finding information. So we'll say log4j, as an example, has a version. So we'll gather that information, store it as a library version to a package. Package is hashed. If we can hash the libraries themselves underneath, we can do that. And so therefore, we have this information that is readily available. So for instance, if someone comes out and says, if you have a db.jar with this hash, you can find it using our methodology. So you can use that against your compliance scans and various other things. We are moving into the compliance world. So right now, our first phase approach was getting it just for inventory solution. And then we're going to be moving it over to compliance so we can actually do CVE checks against those components and provide you at least that information about where those vulnerabilities lay. So it's not like we have this huge database of information. We are literally going to the endpoint and finding where the libraries are. And that is our first step. Over the roadmap timeframe, like the as we grow, we do see we do have an idea of building some content, but it's further down. Like we want to make sure that we're able to do compliance and finding stuff as best as possible.
So what does the customer workflow look like there? Like once they find it, where does Tanium do anything else for them after they find it? If like I imagine in a lot of cases, maybe in some of the cases it doesn't need to be there and they just remove it. But in a lot of cases, I imagine they want to update that library. They maybe want to make some changes. What does that workflow look like beyond the point where they actually find it? Like in the case where you said somebody had 17,000, like are they dumping that to a spreadsheet and just are generating a Jira ticket off of each one of those and just calling home and saying I'm going to be a while, or what do they do then?
So most of the customers are using it to find where the vulnerabilities exist. So the default path. The idea here is that is the first step in figuring out what the application or the vendor is. So if it is in like a Windows environment and it's Windows program files, the Tom app, well, I can go get with my vendor for the Tom app and go contact them and see what they're doing. there's really no way to patch a library specifically that we've seen within this process. Like, because of the fact that it's on the endpoint, it's part of an app, we don't know if it's going to blow something up. The vendor has to provide that information. But we can at least find the version information that we have and then determine where that is. So that's the normal workflow. However, there's also the standard workflows of, if it's in like C user downloads, just delete it. You don't need it, get rid of it, let everybody know that that's going to happen. And that's a workflow that we can do within the tool. If you know for fact that the Tom app is version 1 with that vulnerability, and you already have version 2 keyed up to be deployed, you can auto deploy. So you can find everything that has that and just say, send it. So there's a couple of different methodologies that customers can use. One of my favorite statements so far was we just sold to a customer 100,000 endpoints for this, and it's just the inventory solutions. This isn't anything else like the compliance scans. This is just the inventory. We sold 100,000, and they did an initial POC, and they said, this is a no-brainer. Just buy it. Like, this is something that we absolutely want. And so far, we're doing pretty good with sales on it. Like, it seems to be effectively providing what we say, and we're keeping it very simple. We're not promising the moon. We're not promising any type of SBOM formats. It is literally just find the library when the issue occurs at this moment.
So the idea is that Tanium already has your software asset inventory index. So when the next supply chain apocalypse happens, you can just query your stuff and find it, right? But like you mentioned, the POCs, like folks saying, oh, well, I didn't prepare this ahead of time. I have no software asset inventory, and they know they need to search all this stuff, and they maybe don't want to, try and deploy regex file system searches out to 300,000 machines. Like, when they come to you and say, hey, we'd like to do a POC because we've got, a fire to put out right now. How long does that take, that initial indexing? Like if somebody does a POC, how much longer after that does it take until they can start doing these queries and getting these answers?
So there's a couple of different situations. So one, if they have Tanium, let's say they have Tanium and we need to deploy it to their endpoints.
Yeah, like something like assuming they don't have to have any political battles or
none of that stuff. Yeah. Like we'll take the political stuff off the table. If you take just the fact that if they have Tanium deployed and then the endpoints already have the agents and all of that, or it's easy to do, my machine fully indexed, which is just a MacBook Pro, and I'm not a developer, was something like an hour. To be fully indexed, hitting all of the caps that we put in place, that's like, max CPU usage, max memory usage for index, so we don't, kill the system. For a server, I think it was like 4 hours. And for a developer that had well over 100,000 libraries, so I don't know how many packages that really was, maybe 50, 60,000 packages, but 100,000 libraries took 12 hours to get that information. So to index and then process it. So we're talking about, within 2 to 3 days, you could get your entire environment set up and POC'd and say, okay, where's my log4j? And as soon as some of that data starts coming back, you can actually start getting some of that information immediately. So like all of the workstations that your customers use, or not your customers, your employees use, within a day, you're more than likely getting the data back. Your servers, day and a half max. And then your developer workstations, of course, are going to be the ones that are a little bit more hairy because of all of the stuff they download and they work through, which is appropriate. Like, that's what they do.
Right. The 500,000 files they have on their system, or how?
Oh yeah, and then all the different compilers, and maybe they switch between Java and PHP and Golang. Full stack. We'll put that in quotes, like full stack developer.
Right. Yeah, funny story. Back when I was on the enterprise side, I noticed all the developers would go home at noon on Friday and they wouldn't come back. Like, they'd leave for lunch and just never come back. And I asked one of them about it once, and I found out that's when we had the full disk scan, AV disk scan scheduled, was noon on Friday. And on everybody else's PCs, it finished before they came back from lunch. You know, it finished in like 30, 45 minutes. But the developer machines, it would take like 8 to 12 hours. So they just leave for the rest of the day because their machines were unusable. Of course, we've come a long way from that. You know, that's back when there were single memory channels, you know, single core CPUs. You know, when that full disk scan launched off, you weren't getting anything done.
Yeah, that's and we've come a long way since our initial offering of the indexing. So we make sure that we do it in a appropriate format so that we're not, like I said, reducing utilization to impossible to use. And that goes back to what I was talking about originally, and that's why we put stuff into our client extensions. It's so that we can manage that performance and that you're able to continue to use the machine even though we're doing some of this heavy lifting in the back.
So you're a product manager. How, you know, if I can shift gears a little bit, I'm kind of curious from your perspective here, especially with the products that you're building here. What do you think about ChatGPT? Have you and your team already taken a look at it from like a perspective of, can this do some tech writing, you know, build some product content for us, that kind of thing?
Interesting question. So I actually have a friend who does not work for Tanium. I'm going to clear that up right away. And he will get emails and they're asking for something. And so he goes to ChatGPT and says, here's the email, business, tell them no. He then takes the stuff from ChatGPT, puts it in, makes some minor changes, and then gets responses like, that's the best no I've ever heard. So that's the type of stuff I'm hearing about ChatGPT. We've used it for some funny things like, how do I name this new module, or how do I name this new product, because I'm suck at naming, and like, you know, this is what I want it to do, and then it comes up with some interesting names. So we're using it for that. I haven't heard the developers have used it really, but definitely the I guess raw content that you have to push out, like the just the verboseness of the emails, the verboseness of those types of things. I think there's been value for some people using that.
Yeah, just you know, curious about that, because it's something, you know, I think everybody's going to be experimenting with for a while, you know, and probably are right now, you know, trying to see how much work you could potentially automate there, especially as they roll out you know, commercial licensing and agreements, you know, for companies to use it for stuff like that.
So my personal opinion is ChatGPT will be a lot like some of those automated HTML programs. It'll work, but will it be as efficient as if a programmer does it? So, you know, Front Page, I think, was the Microsoft version, and if you really looked at it, it would just totally screw up the HTML. Like, it would just be horrible. So I have a feeling that would be done like, you know, hey, create a loop that does this and checks for those, and here's your variables. Yeah, it's going to create it, but you're still going to have to go in and modify it in the context of whatever function you're wanting to do. So I think there's some value that may make it nicer than using just Stack Overflow, but I do think that you're still going to run into some of the, you know, you need a developer to understand this fully type of situations.
Arguably, you are using Stack Overflow, right?
Exactly. That's part of it, right? That is 100%.
What was it trained on, right?
It's just, is it actually correct Stack Overflow or not? So I would hope that there was some stuff in that. But speaking of, did you see where what was it? Google came out and it had the wrong answer, so they had trained it on the wrong information.
So what's funny about that? I was thinking about talking about that during our news segment today, but what's bad about that is that it got the wrong answer, and humans saw it, and humans used it for the marketing campaign anyway. That's where the problem is, because, and I think that's something we're going to have to get used to with this AI stuff. Like, I'm very curious, to your point, whether when they were training it on Stack Overflow, like, you get the green check mark where the person asking the question tags something as the correct answer, or the answer that helped them, right? I wonder if there was any, I wonder if it was just indiscriminate, just scraping the stuff, or if there was any kind of like when they go to Stack Overflow, they throw in some, custom training to say, hey, the text next to the green check mark, in that div section of the HTML is more important than everything else. Prefer that over everything else. Because if you don't, and based on my testing, like it doesn't know the difference between lies and truth, right and wrong, good answer, bad answer. Like it's just a parrot, right? It's just repeating stuff that it's heard.
Yeah, this is the same thing that I've been working through in the industry as far as like machine learning and AI and all of those things. It's it's great to say all of those things, but it really comes down to data in, and everyone always likes to say how amazing AI is at facial recognition. And I always like to tell people that aren't technical, I said, well, they've got a set series of variables that every face has. If you go to a police sketch artist, they have a series of facial structures. They have a series of noses, mouths, eyes. There's only so many different variations. And so you can train AI to look at faces and do facial recognition because you've got a confined set of data that is the same. You try to do AI on unstructured data, it's impossible. Like you can't, we are not at the point where it can take unstructured data and say, or from a data warehouse and say, okay, this is what it means. It still needs all of the machine learning and the algorithms and all of the things that we say, but that's human interface. And so it's the same thing with this. Like it's literally just saying what is a good answer for no with the context of these keywords, and it's just writing a sentence.
And the thing I'm noticing, like people ask me all the time, like, how did you find that? Like they'll say, I was looking for something online, I couldn't find it. And I have noticed that there is some skill in learning how to ask the AI for what you're looking for and get the answer or the type of answer or the answer in the right context that you're looking for. So already I've seen, hiring, like job recs, and there's even a website, Prompt Base, where people sell the prompts that they use on these AIs to get the output that people are looking for. So I think it's super interesting. Like just like with search engines and with voice assistants, like you have to teach yourself how to ask them correctly so that you can get the answer you want, which is not how this technology's sold or marketed or supposed to work. But they can still do useful things if we learn, how to structure the query correctly, right?
Yeah, this has been ongoing since, Google. We had so back in the day, we had an IBM server that had an issue, and we had a night shift worker, really good friend of mine, and his Google capabilities were amazing. Like he could find stuff, and he just figured it out. He could speak the machine language, and we couldn't figure out everything. Like those of us on the day shift, we were looking for all of these different things, and we said, hey, can you see if you can figure this out? He found an obscure German website with the exact issue and the fix, and it was like one answer, and it was in German, and he had to use Google Translate to figure it out and all of those things. But yeah, that's like you look at him and you're like, how did you find this? He goes, well, I just kept searching, like kept zeroing in like on these things using different keywords, and found it in German. That was the craziest thing I've ever heard of Google, and this was in mid 2000s.
Yeah. It's well, and I think it's appropriate for the conversation we're having, right? Because one of Tanium's biggest features is helping you find things, right? Oh, so it's interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to bring it back full circle, right? Before we end the interview.
So yeah, I've been in IT since, well, the bio says like 98, and one of the things that shocked me about coming to Tanium is just the speed and scale that we can get the information with the endpoint management, just the endpoint platform. I was used to star networks. You have a hub, and then if you need to get more information, you can only do 3,000 agents. You need another one, and you need 3,000 agent. 3,000 devices. You could do agentless and all of that. And so when they told me that it could do this, and this was, starting new hire training 2 years and 2 months ago, I was like, this is vaporware. This can't be true. There's no way that somebody figured this out. And when you see it in action, it is almost unreal that you can do stuff like this that fast. The ability to say, go give me all of your installed applications from, the largest networks in the world, million endpoints, and it comes back in moments, is just unbelievable. And as I stated at the beginning, the power of Tanium is not the modules. The modules are great, but it is the platform, and it is the go give me this information, pull it back, and present it in seconds. And then, like I said, if you have 100,000 endpoints and you want to do a discovery scan on your entire network, we can do that with our endpoints. Like, that's what they do. They're going to go and do ARP cache or pings or nmaps across the white space between their agents. And so now, instead of it taking, just something like a discovery scan can take months with a standard agent type of architecture with other tools, we can do it in hours for 100,000 endpoints and find things that nobody has ever been able to find because it's either not online. We're doing it continuously. We've had customers find Xboxes and PlayStations on their network. And in that instance, maybe it was a bad thing, maybe it wasn't, but just finding that type of stuff is security or concerns. So yeah, Tanium is second to none when it comes to just the endpoint, the platform. The endpoint platform is by far the best thing that I've ever seen. And that's not just me because I'm wearing Tanium. I mean, if I worked somewhere else and I found out about this, I would say it's a lie. And then when I see it, I'd be like, everything in my power to bring it in. It does 80 to 90% of everything you're ever going to need to do on an endpoint. If you know what you're doing. Again, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got to put that caveat in there because I don't want anyone going like, but Tom said, it does everything.
Right. Yeah. So Tom, as we wrap up here, just one final question for you. As a product manager, and I might be setting myself up for failure here if you're not allowed to talk about it, but what do you have on your roadmap that you're most excited to get out in 2023?
So SBOM or anything?
Anything as a product
anything
manager at Tanium. Yeah.
So we are continuing to invest in software bill of materials. There's some things that we're going to be coming out that we're going to try to figure out application dependencies, usability. That's super exciting from an SBOM standpoint. But my most exciting thing is we are really looking to do more of a data aggregation. So if Tanium is an endpoint management piece, we need to be able to pull in data from third-party tools to take action on that endpoint. It is probably the number one request I've had from our customers, and we are investing in it. We're calling it Asset Graph. We threw it out there at Converge, so it's not like it's super secret. But that's the thing that I'm working on that is most exciting right now, is the fact that we're going to be able to take in more information from third-party tools so something like business services, criticalities, and saying, go patch all of my ticketing servers or all of my catering servers, or go get me the if there's any bad libraries, circling back to software bill of materials, on just my ticketing boxes, because those are the ones I'm really concerned about and I want to look at today. So that's the exciting thing for me, is how we're going to integrate into a data layer that is more concise and appropriate across the entire platform.
All right. Yeah. So good answer. Third-party integrations, definitely. Yeah. Whatever data you can't get directly from your engines. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff out there that's good context for the data that you've already got.
Yeah, and we can do a bit of it today. It's just on scale. Like, we're really point solution for a lot of those now, and we want to be able to do it more like whatever the customer wants. It makes it easier for us to then move faster. So, instead of having it be gate kept by devs, we can actually have customers build it, or, our wonderful TAMs, or even me, I could build it. Like, that could be something that I could do on my spare time whenever I get some.
Great. Great stuff, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. And stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk the state of Zero Trust with Ashley Leonard from 6 Sense.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to go ahead and take off.
Thank you.